Ariel, thank you for joining me today. How are you?
I'm really good. How are you? Thank you for having me.
You are quite welcome. I am doing great. Thank you for asking. I'm excited to dive into our conversation today because I think your story and the lessons you've learned from it can resonate with a lot of the listeners, even coaches, clinicians, and athletes, everyone. So I'm excited to dive into all of that. So we'll kind of get started with you and who you are. So the question I love to start with is just who are you?
Who am I? Well, I am Ariel. That's my name. I have red hair, so I was the inspiration for the Little Mermaid. I'd like to say.
I like
it. Anyway, and little kids stare at me in awe when they find out my name.
That's awesome.
So background, my story. I grew up as a competitive figure skater and ballerina. For the first part of my childhood, I was mainly focused on figure skating. So intense training, competition, was very much on track for Olympics, very focused. So that was a huge part of my life. And dancing was always done alongside it, and it helped my figure skating. And then, as I got a little bit older and reached my teenage years, I made the switch to make peace and end my figure skating career and transition into the dance world as a professional dancer. And so I was with ballet companies. And through all that, I went to college. I got a degree in architecture, really because I wanted to be more normal. And I felt like, because I didn't really have a high school life. So when people talk to me about parties in high school, I didn't go to them. I didn't even know what that was. So when I went to college, I wanted a bit more normalcy and studied something very, it was a good blend of my artistic nature and technical side, which I really loved. But alongside it, I danced the whole entire time. And when I graduated, I got this brilliant idea to move to New York City and pursue Broadway. And I had always wanted to move to New York. I was actually inspired by what was that show called? Felicity. I don't know if you remember that. Sorry, I totally just aged myself. But it's about a girl who grew up in the same town I did and moved to New York. And I mean, you can see how I could relate. But I was just in awe of New York City, and I really wanted to live there and did everything I could to live there. So I moved once I graduated, and I did the whole waitressing thing. I got an agent, I got gigs and did the whole shebang. And I got close to getting Broadway gigs, but my agent actually ended up sending me on a lot of fitness calls. So commercial, print, some videos for fitness related things. And one of those jobs happened to be with a guy named Sean T. And if you don't know who he is, look him up. He has a ton of workout videos. He's been in the industry for a very long time. And I got a couple gigs with him, and I ended up in his Insanity workouts and Insanity Asylum. So I was in both of those videos, and I did a lot of promos for him too. And he is the nicest guy. And he really kind of helped shift my perspective when it came to being able to lead a group of people, because I had never been a teacher before. And when we were in rehearsals or whenever we were in a large group and he was teaching class, he would always at some point bring me up to the front of the room and say, "Everybody follow Ariel." And I was just like, what do you mean? I don't know how to teach. And it gave me this bug of like, oh, people are following me and I can actually teach. And So it kind of spurred the inspiration to get into personal training and to start teaching fitness classes. And I ended up teaching at a boutique fitness studio in New York City. And it just landed me in this boutique fitness world at the time when boutique fitness was booming. And it was the perfect place for me because it blended my dance background with the training background and then teaching people how to move better. And it was this perfect balance of the things I really loved to do while I was earning a living and still getting to dance and do all of that. So I did that. I ended up that progressed into being a co-founding trainer of another boutique fitness studio where I basically came up with 50% of the content for all of their platforms. I trained the entire training team and managed the team across multiple locations and was really happy doing what I loved. But I was also working out minimum 3 hours a day because the type of workouts we would do were us performing with them. So whether we were teaching a class or with private clients, we were doing the workouts with them. So my body really didn't get a ton of rest. And after years and years and years and years of doing that, I ended up getting injured. And I actually worked on an injury for 2.5 years before I did anything about it. And it got to a point where I couldn't walk. I couldn't walk up the stairs. I couldn't walk 2 New York City blocks, which are really short. And my husband said, you really have to do something about this. This is really not good. And it affects you in so many ways that you don't even realize. Like I was angry all the time. I was just like pissed and just not myself because I was hanging on to this. I was dealing with so much pain and it was really, really hard.
So with that injury, actually let's talk about that injury a little bit. So it was kind of 2.5 years that you were dealing with that. Were you ignoring it that entire time? Were you trying to deal with it during that time and it just kept getting worse? What was that time period like?
So at first I really ignored it. I did what a lot of athletes do and a lot of dancers do, where you just ignore it and you're like, oh, it'll go away eventually or whatever. And then it didn't go away. And then I started, doing some massage therapy. Through some clients, I had access to some really great PTs and acupuncturists, and they noticed how much pain I was in, and they said, you need to go see my guy. You like go get some treatment, see if that helps. And I started going to acupuncture, which really helped a lot. And coming from somebody who is legitimately terrified of needles, the fact that I was going regularly, one tells you how much pain I was in and how much relief I was seeking. And I was willing to try these different modalities to help mitigate the pain. And so the acupuncture definitely would help, but because I never was able to give my body any kind of real rest, it never got better. And the other thing that was sort of this running thought in my head was, well, it can't really get worse. It already hurts. So whatever, yeah, it can always get worse. I learned. And listen, I had to learn this the hard way. There are so many athletes that come to mind when you think of this, like this passion that overrides this pain that, I don't know, it was an adrenaline rush. People were like, how did you do it? How did you go up and teach? And I said, well, honestly, the minute I started teaching it, I didn't think about it. It was afterwards that was really terrible, that's when I couldn't walk. Because I do think there's this adrenaline rush that happens that definitely acts as a drug and can help you ignore it. I mean, I think of what Carrie Strug in the Olympics when she did that. I mean, people think, how the heck, how could she have done that? Well, I mean, when you're under that kind of pressure and you want something that badly, the adrenaline can help you. And then it's a mess.
Right, exactly.
Then you're screwed. But yeah, so I did those few things, and then cost was always an issue in the back of my mind. Like, oh gosh, if I have to do something, it's going to cost a lot of money, and I didn't really have health insurance for a long time, and that was also part of it. And then, I finally had some health insurance, so I was able to go see a doctor, and they did an MRI and found the tear. And they also found out that I had what's called hip dysplasia, and that was the root cause of the tear. But anyway, so that's getting into the other stuff. But to answer your question, I tried many things.
You did try. You did try.
Thank you.
A couple different directions we could go here. Let's talk about first. I want to come back to the root cause conversation and continue your story a little bit now. So you did have a tear, you had hip dysplasia, you had surgery for it, if I remember right. What was that like afterwards coming back? Like, was it like how soon? Because give us perspective here, just because so many people like, oh, I had surgery, I'm going to be great in a month and we'll be back to everything. Give me some perspective as far as like what that rehab and recovery process timeline looked like.
Yeah. Well, I will go back to then what the causes are, because I think that did affect how I felt afterwards. So when I found out I had hip dysplasia, I spoke to the doctor about several different options, and my choices were I could do nothing, I could do the orthoscopic repair, I could do this, and I forget the name of the actual surgery. I used to know it, but it's basically where they fix the hip dysplasia, but it's a very, very invasive surgery, long recovery of like a year or more, or a hip replacement, which I asked about. And I said, we went through all of the options, and the one that actually fixed the cause, that surgery, we decided that because I was in a later stage of my dancing career, that didn't really make sense. Like if I was younger and I had a long career to go, that would preserve the hip, and that would be a good choice, or a choice that I might want to pursue. But we went with the orthoscope, which had a really good prognosis. He gave me the timeline, he had everything written out. So I was very well prepared for what the recovery process would be, and how long it would take to get back. And so I felt very comfortable with the decision I made. And I also had a very good physical therapist who was also recommended by the doctor himself, who said she had the same surgery, she was a dancer. So all of these things made me feel a lot more comfortable with having to do it. And then the other thing that helped was speaking to other people who I knew had hip surgeries, and they told me that the pain you're in now is going to be very different than the pain post-op, and you won't have the pain you have now. It's just going to be a healing pain, and you're going to get better, and that's eventually going to go away. And so that was enough to, again, make me feel more comfortable and at ease with having to do this, because I think going into any surgery can be pretty scary, especially your first one, when you really have no idea what that's going to feel like. I was terrified on many levels. But on the rehab side of it, it was exactly what those people had told me. They said they were right. I didn't have that pain anymore. It was completely gone. The day after surgery, I started physical therapy. That was the wildest thing to me, that I actually got on a bike. I mean, I was pedaling like very slowly, barely doing anything, but they get you on the bike and they have you move. And I just thought the whole rehab process was incredible. And I felt really, really good.
Awesome. Very cool. So then after that was rehabbed, were you back to training like normal? Were you back to, like, did you get back to dancing or did you stop that?
No, so I will go back a little bit too and say that I made a deal with my doctor and said that I'm not going to do the dancer thing anymore, where I ignore you guys and push harder than I should after this. I'm going to listen to everything you say. And I did. I was on point with the PT. And because of the knowledge that I have about the body and because of the training, I was able to incorporate physical therapy as I got better and as I progressed. So what I mean by that is, even now when my hip gets tight, I still have to go back and do some of the PT stuff that helped my hip back then. And so, yeah, I was getting back to normal, feeling really good. And then my knee tore. I mean, it was 6 months into my hip surgery. I was feeling really awesome. I was doing, single leg hops, doing weight bearing exercises on that surgical hip, and surgical hip on the hip that had surgery, and feeling great. And then my knee decided to just rebel against me, and my knee tore. And I was like, what is happening to me? Why? So to answer your question, no, I didn't quite get there.
What do you know what the cause of the knee tear was? Do they have a reason that they suspected?
No, I was actually having some knee pain in conjunction with the hip, and the doctor thought that could be related. And that knee pain never really went away. It was minor. It was not like anything close to what my hip was feeling like. It was one of those kind of aches and pains, and it would act up once in a while, but it wasn't a pain that I felt daily, right? So no, I was on a hike one day and I just started walking down the hill, and I thought, wow, that's really odd. That feels really bad. And the good news is, the lesson I learned from the hip was, this could get worse. So I'm going to go to the doctor right now and nip it in the bud. I'm going to figure out what's going on, because I don't want to deal with this anymore. I want my body to be fixed. Please fix me. Like, I'm done with this. So that's what I did. I went to the doctor and they did an MRI. There was a meniscus tear. And the good news about that was, he said, bad news, it's a tear, but the reasons why it's causing you so much pain is it's like the flappy one. And so the only way to really, you can try to deal with it, but surgery is a good option. And at that point, I just said, let's nip this in the bud. I don't want to deal with this anymore. And the recovery from that surgery is way faster. So in I went again.
6 months later after the hip, right?
Yeah, by that time it was like 7 or 8 months later. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, at least you learn from the first time. You don't let it linger, because we don't know what will happen then.
Yeah. Good lesson to learn.
Good lessons learned. I know what has been your experience with the surgeons, with the physical therapists, kind of with everyone in the medical field that you talk to? Like, I feel like a lot of times they tell people as far as like you'll be back to normal in 3 months, 6 months, whatever that time frame is. But everyone's a little bit different in how fast they come back. Everyone's a little bit different in what they're getting back to. What are some factors that you like, just from your experience, are not being accounted for when surgeons or physical therapists are telling them, like, yeah, you're going to be back in X many months?
Well, I think both of those people say different things. So usually the surgeons give you a window of time and they say within, 6 weeks your knee is going to be better, or within this period of time you should be up and running. I think it's a bit of a fallacy just because, like you said, people are different and it depends on what you want your normal activity level to be. For someone like myself, walking and just walking is not good enough. That is not my normal. My normal is being able to do sport and to do things without inhibition, and to, as a dancer, I need to be able to take my leg a certain way, and I need to have a certain amount of mobility and flexibility that other people don't need to have. And so with my hip surgeon works with a ton of dancers and athletes, and so he understood that, and he was very good at giving me a proper timeline, and that laid out a very good expectation for me. In fact, I think I surpassed it and I did better. With my knee surgery, they said 6 weeks. It took me, I would say, 3 months before I was able to do my normal. Within the 6 week period, yeah, I could bike, I could walk, I could, do a basic, I could do a normal workout class. It just wasn't to the same level that I wanted to be at. And the physical therapist that I've seen knew that. And when I said, I came in, I'm like, so I'm going to get in 6 weeks. They looked at me and they laughed and they said, well, in 6 weeks, you'll be able to do X, Y, and Z. And that helped me adjust my expectations, because then I said, okay, well, at least I know that now. So I could adjust that and I could allow myself more time.
Yeah, that's great. That's awesome. Now I know that the knee surgery wasn't the last trauma or surgery that your body had in a short period of time. What else was going on after the knee?
Well, quite a bit, actually. A week after my knee surgery, my husband and I moved across country. So we moved from New York to Los Angeles. He got a job offer and we decided to move. So we uprooted our lives and moved across country. And a few months later, I got pregnant and I had a baby, and which is very exciting. However, I ended up with an unplanned C-section, which was my third surgery in 18 months. And that really pushed me over the edge as far as just being really down about it for a very long time. And I knew there wasn't anything more I could have done to prevent that. That as a woman, and with all the women I've worked with over the years, I knew that. It was so disappointing, and it was a really tough one to get over. And I almost think knowing too much about the body can work in your detriment, because a C-section is a major surgery. It's a major abdominal surgery, and that one took longer for me to recover from.
What did that recovery look like? Because it is a major surgery, and I think so many times it's just kind of thought of as like just having a baby, just coming out a different way. And so we don't consider it as much of a trauma as what it actually is. So for you, like what did that process kind of look like into getting back to activity? And like how much trauma is a C-section really on the body?
How much what?
How much trauma like is a C-section really on the body, or even just pregnancy in general?
Well, it's a lot. Your body goes through a lot of changes. And, I'm lucky because, I mean, no, but nothing can really prepare you for your first one. It's just, it's a new experience. And everyone's birth experience is a bit different. But one of the reasons why I think the C-section was so hard was, and those of you who have kids, any which way, like you understand the importance of being able to hold your baby and what that means. And when you have a C-section, it hurts to hold your baby because everything you do involves your core and it hurts. It's like you can't sit up, you can't really move for a little while. And again, you get better each day, but that moment that a lot of us women want, especially as like a new mother wanting to have that bond with your baby, that was hard because you don't want to think, oh, holding you hurts me. Like that's not what I pictured having a baby would look like or would feel like. I mean, of course, you have this immense love, and that's all you want to do is hold your baby. And if you're breastfeeding, and that's another experience. So that was one thing that was really difficult. And just, I think my doctor at that point knew my personality a little bit, and actually she did not give me the clear at the 8-week mark. She actually made me wait 2 more weeks before I could do more than just walk, which I'm grateful for. And I think that was a good call because I needed that extra time. And yeah, so I think there's that whole thing too when doctors give women the clear and how confusing that can be.
Yeah. And like, let's dive into that a little bit further. Obviously don't go outside your expertise and what you know about it, but
Yeah.
when giving the clear, when doctors are giving the clear, both from a natural birth and a C-section birth standpoint, like what does that actually mean? Does it mean like you can go back to everything you were doing before, or is it like let's start easy and then kind of work your way back?
It really depends on the woman. And there's a few aspects. One, it depends on the woman and her experience. So let's say everything goes smooth and you had a vaginal birth and you healed quite nicely. I mean, people are literally back in 2 weeks and they can feel fine. But should they be doing intense core work and all that stuff? I don't really believe so. I still don't think the body is quite ready for that. I think no matter how you have a child, you've got to give your body enough time to heal. Like all of that stuff that went on in there needs time to go back to normal. 2 weeks is not enough time on that end. But listen, I mean, if things aren't painful, then yeah, you can do it. But a lot of women still, when they're doing higher impact things, they still don't feel, that does not feel good. You feel like things are falling out. That is a sign you need to stop doing running or any type of impact for a little while until you don't feel that anymore. It's really interesting because in Europe, they are really good at providing postpartum care and postpartum physical therapy specifically for mothers who, doesn't matter what kind of birth you have, they put you on some type of PT program for that. And for both, like I said, any way the baby comes out, they do that for you. And it's just interesting because they don't do that for us here at all. Everyone's off to fend for themselves and to find their own information. And as far as the C-section goes, when they give you the clear to exercise, they do that at 8 weeks. That, in my opinion, is too soon to return to any type of intense working out or intense activity. There are so many other things that are beneficial to the body than working out hardcore. And also, there are other factors, like you're not getting any sleep. So maybe your body doesn't even want to move that intensely. You're breastfeeding. There are so many other factors that go into that, again, it takes time for a woman's body to return back to normal. I'll never forget this. I'm going to tell a quick story.
Go for it.
So one of my clients in New York City, I worked with her through 2 pregnancies, before and after. And the first one, when she came back, because she was anxious, she was a former dancer, and now she's a big real estate mogul and very successful, and she was ready to get back in. She just wanted to go. And I said to her, I should have said a little more tactfully, looking back, but I said, she asked me how long it's going to take to get back to where she was, and I said, probably about a year. She looked at me and her jaw dropped, and I think she was about to cry. And I realize now that was probably really devastating. But it does take about that amount of time for your body to really get back to a normal that you feel more connected to. Even though other people, you can still look fabulous and, you're doing all the right things, but there's something that happens with a woman too, postpartum. It's like there's things going on inside that just don't feel the same, and nobody else can see it, but you feel it, and it's just like, oh, that's changed. Is that ever going to go back? And you don't know. So those are just some of the realities that women have to deal with, and it's not fun, but it's surmountable.
There we go. If a woman returns too aggressively or too quickly after, or like postpartum, I guess, essentially, what things are they at risk of, like injury wise, damage wise, internally? Like, what can happen to the body if they come back too aggressively, too fast?
Well, the main things that women typically need to be concerned about postpartum are diastasis recti and prolapse. Those are 2 things that are really important to address properly. So diastasis recti is the separation of the abs, which happens to every woman because the abs have to separate in order to stretch and make room for the baby. But for some women, that doesn't go back right away, and it can be, there's different degrees of severity. And this happens to be in my wheelhouse. It's one of my specialties. I actually have a program called Rehab for postpartum women, where there are specific things to work on regarding your core, which is your core muscles, your TVA, and your pelvic floor, that need to get stronger before you implement any other type of intense core exercises. So no crunches, ladies, none. Forget about those. They're not effective. Stop doing them. So if you're in, a CrossFit class and the instructor is saying crunch, 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 please stop. unless you're really strong and you've already understood you don't pooch out, that you don't cone, that's all taken care of, then okay, you can do some crunches, but they still have to be done correctly. So there's a lot of ab rehab that has to happen. So I didn't do any core exercises, like real core exercises that people are familiar with or more familiar with, until like 8 months or so. I was doing my breath technique, really incorporating the TVA with pelvic floor. And then the other thing women should do is, or I typically recommend, is seeing a pelvic floor PT and learning whether or not you have a prolapse to any degree. And I mean, that's a whole other topic. And, but those are important things to address for women, and getting those things checked by a professional. So I check, diastasis all the time. And if it's not fixable by me, then I usually refer out to another specialist. But yeah, I think that answered it. Right?
It does. And, I don't think anyone can mention it enough as far as the importance of postpartum PT. And I didn't know they automatically do that in Europe. That's awesome. But just the more I dive into, I'm not a women's health therapist. It's not something I ever wanted to get into, but I know a lot of them, and I've learned from them the very importance of like how traumatizing labor and childbirth is, and how important proper rehab and therapy after that is.
Yeah. And, it all ties back to the other injuries I had. I think it, each time I went through something, I got better at handling it and rehabbing in the right way, and adjusting my expectations. So there is that. And, the other thing that people don't realize is, especially with, an injury like a hip or knee or ankle, is that if you are doing intense working out and you are, well, I guess even if you're not, I always hear people say, yeah, my knee is still not like great, or it goes through these phases of being okay and then maybe tight. Or I always recommend to do maintenance with PTs. I do once a month with my PT, and every time she does this, you'll know, Brianne, what this is. The seatbelt, where she puts the seatbelt on my hip.
Oh, yep.
And she wraps it around. What's that called?
I just call it hip distraction.
Okay. Oh my gosh, that feels so good. I can't even tell you. It's basically, they put a seatbelt around like your groin and wrap it around themselves, and they pull out on the seatbelt. So they're basically pulling your hip out of the joint and making it, loosening it up, and it feels really, really good to this day. I mean, it's like 4 years later. So she does that, and I'm like, oh, I can walk again. And it's things like that, realizing what activities still cause some of that discomfort, and before letting it get to anything bad, to make sure you're still taking care of it. You're still returning back to some of those boring exercises. One of the things I do is I incorporate PT into people's programs without them really knowing it. But, if I know somebody has a back thing or a knee thing or a hip thing, there's always some level of a PT exercise in there to help them make sure that they're keeping it strong, or they're maintaining that strength in the right way without doing something, without overexerting and doing the brute strength stuff. So that's really important. People need to know that once you have the surgery, once you get injured, never feel bad about having to return to the boring exercises. Do it once a week, or as often as you'd like, just to keep up the maintenance. Really important.
Yeah, and I think those things are great. Like a lot of times with my athletes, I'm programming those as part of their warm up, because I'm like, they're just really good for activation. It's like spend 5 to 10 minutes as part of your warm up and continue on. That way you're getting it inconsistently, maybe 5-10 minutes a day, but like that's all you really need to kind of maintain a lot of that stuff.
Mm-hmm. Well, and it's funny because my mom had a hip replacement a few years ago, and even to this day, she says, yeah, my hip is okay, it's good, but I think I might have done too much. And I said, well, did you do the exercises I gave you this week? Go back and do the video. I made a little video for her, And she's like, yeah, I'll do it. And I'm like, have you seen your physical therapist? And it's a pain in the butt to go see a PT, but do it. It's so worth it. It's so worth it. And you feel like you're getting taken care of. And that's really nice.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Ariel, you've provided a lot of good information and just life lessons for people.
I
If
hope
someone,
so.
yeah, if someone has questions for you or even is just interested in your ab rehab program, where can they find you and your information?
They can go to my website, arielhoffman.com. I am also on Instagram at wellxarielhoffman. That's the best place to find me, and just get in touch via those platforms. Those are the best. And we can talk about it. But yeah, I want to get people up and going and feeling good. It's most important.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time today. This was really fun, Ariel.
Well, thank you, Brianne. I had a great time. Thank you so much.
Of course.